Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Paul from For Real. We are here today with Cory Aymar of Toothless Reptiles. Hey, Cory, how you doing? Thanks for coming on.
Good, good. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, this is awesome. I've followed you for quite a while, from the days of Don Vito, living off
Yeah.
of the kitchen, wandering around through the house,
Yeah.
to the new facility, which is pretty awesome. So, if you want, kind of just give everybody a quick background, and we'll go from there.
Well, I got into reptiles. Well, I've been into reptiles my whole life. I grew up doing rescues for Project Wildlife. We used to rescue possums, me and my brother and my mom. So we've always had a bunch of animals growing up. We had potbelly pigs, all kinds of good stuff. So I've always been an animal-oriented guy. And then when I was about 18 or 19, I got a house and I ended up getting my first water monitor, which was Yoshi. And then she started laying eggs. And then I got into kind of learning about genetics of the water monitors. I got, I got a male to breed her with, started producing some just normal water monitors. And then eventually I remember I saw a picture of a black dragon in an egg on Vital Exotics website.
Mm-hmm.
And I contacted Chris at Vital and I got a het black dragon from him, started breeding that. And then that turned into like a whole different, I opened up a can of worms once I started messing with, het genes and dominant genes
Mm-hmm.
and then it just kind of became more complicated, which made it more fun. And then, 17 years later, now I have this huge facility that I'm sitting in with cages that are 16 feet tall. So,
which is amazing. We talk about big animals like monitors and their needs and requirements, and obviously it's not very many people that can give that 16 foot by 16 foot by 10 foot or 8 foot deep, however deep they are. We had retics here. Me and you have talked once before about big snakes and big monitors and size cages. And, what I guess the best thing to say is we do what we can to keep the animals happy. Right. And at the end of the day, I think after Florida passed all their laws, last year we got rid of all of our retics. We don't have anything big anymore, just some boas and some smaller stuff. But I think at the end of the day, what you're doing is amazing, and your success, I think, is a glowing light in this industry as to what you've done.
well, I appreciate that. Yeah, thank you for the support. I don't think that the animals necessarily need what I'm giving them, which you had alluded to, but I do think that there is some people who take a minimalistic approach who have more resources. And then there's also some people who look like they're taking a minimalistic approach, but they're giving their animals every resource that they have available to them specifically.
Yeah.
So I think there's a catch-22 in between, but like the animals are so robust and adaptive. There's a lot of room for error as far as just keeping goes, which kind of sucks in a way because it makes people able to make long-term mistakes without them seeing the negative aspects of that mistake in a short period of time. But also, it's just kind of one of those things where I think there's a lot of other ways that you can get around maybe not having the space to have obviously a 16-foot tall enclosure. That's ridiculous. And they're 12 feet deep, just so you know.
Oh, Jesus. That's insane. But it's a great setup, and it was a great series that you filmed as you went through and did it. And I think all too often we get so nervous as keepers to show everybody what we're doing because either somebody's going to criticize us, which if you're an adult, you take constructive criticism and you move on, or somebody's going to steal our idea and do it better than we are. And you setting your cameras up and showing that whole process, the river going through, the building of the cages, the lighting, was awesome. And as far as that goes, have you noticed a change in the so the attitude or the characteristics of the animal as opposed to where they were before when you had them?
Yeah, so the biggest thing you notice is in like the arboreal species, like the lace and the croc, is they self-regulate their temperature based on altitude in the enclosure. So they'll constantly move in the enclosure to different heights to self-regulate, where before you have an arboreal species moving laterally in an enclosure because that's the only axis that they had was an x-axis, you know. So
Yeah.
it's just kind of cool to see, you know, a monitor essentially moving in a z-axis, you know, to regulate temps, which is obviously much more natural. That's what they would be doing in the wild. So it's cool to see kind of how the animals naturally adapted to the large enclosures. And one of the big questions that a lot of people had was, like, are they really going to use all that space, you know? And they, the first thing the crocs did when I put them in the enclosures was get in the branches and crawled all the way up to the top of the cages. So it's one of those things where if it's a water monitor, like chances are they're not going to use them. I mean, I didn't even bother building the water monitor enclosures 16 feet. They're only 8 feet tall.
Yeah.
And then as far as them utilizing that square footage, I mean, most of the upper end of square footage isn't being used. You can put branches and shelves and basking areas up high and you kind of force them to use it. But naturally speaking, they don't really care.
Yeah.
I mean, they're ground dwelling animals. They want to go in the water and they'll crawl up a little bit, maybe 3 or 4 feet high, just like they would in the wild, maybe up on top of rocks or whatever.
Okay.
But they're certainly not like the lace and the crocs. Well, they'll scale a wall.
Yeah. you know what's
so.
funny is as we talk about, you know, you just talked about the utilization of the whole cage, and last year I was a part of moving some animals, some venomous stuff into new enclosures, and the at the Reptile Preservation Institute, they set up UVB lights on top of each one of them, the HID lights. And all of those mambas that we put in there immediately went right to a basking spot right underneath those lights within 10 to 12 inches of the light. And they sit there constantly. So I know people say, well, snakes don't need UVB. They don't need this. They don't need that. Well, I don't think they necessarily need it as much as they like it, or maybe utilize it from time to time if you give it to them, because all those snakes bask underneath those UV lights constantly. They'll go sit up underneath there and they look like they truly enjoy it.
Yeah, I mean, human beings, you know, they need UV for vitamin D. So if you think that a reptile that literally cannot live without supplemental heat, and naturally in the wild, that heat is only coming from sunlight. If you think that human beings have evolved to use sunlight, but an animal that literally has to have sunlight in order to digest food, meaning heat, it's just a ridiculous notion that people think that these guys don't need UV. You have the same stuff with the monitors. Even the lace monitors, what was happening with the lace and the crocs as well was, so they're like programmed to go to a light source for heat. So what happened in the beginning was I had like a incandescent light bulb just for UV, like I do with the water monitors. And my heat source was ceramic. Well, the crocs and the lace were going under the light bulbs constantly to bask, not realizing that there was a hot spot right next to them with ceramics, but they didn't know. They couldn't register it as producing heat the same as the water monitors do, because the water monitors are ground dwellers. They'll find heat no matter where it's at. The croc monitors and the lace are constantly looking for the sunlight. You know, if a croc monitor's in a canopy, it's just like, you know, all the trees that fill in the space in the rainforest because they're looking for the sunlight coming through. So you end up with this like completely pitch black almost area under the canopy in the rainforest. It's the same thing with the water monitors. They're programmed, or not the water monitors, the crocs and the lace, they're just programmed to find the sunlight. But yeah, I mean, even with snakes, it's like, what do you risk in giving them a more naturalistic way to live. It doesn't, there's zero risk involved. There's only risk involved if you don't give it to them, you know? Plus it's like, what are you basing your successes off when you have an animal that you're keeping without UV? Like, you're just saying that it's still alive. So that means that you can, it's fine. Like, no, that's a horrible way to keep your animals. You know, I don't need any of this stuff, you know, none of this stuff is needed, you know, or required. So I'm sure you probably already heard my UV video rant about monitor lizards.
I actually saw it and saved it, and we've had so much going on the last 2 weeks. It's like I have probably 30 videos in my saved that I have to go back and watch. And it's every time I get a minute, something else comes up. So what is your opinion on that? I mean, you obviously have a video up, but
yeah, I mean, there's just no reason not to give them UV. If you ask somebody who doesn't give a monitor lizard UV to tell you why, they don't have a good answer aside from money. That's it. The only reason is because the bulbs are a quarter of the price. That's the only reason they do it. There's no health benefit to not giving your animal UV.
And I will say this, if you look, the price on UV lighting has come down so far, and there's so much good stuff out there. It just, if you can't
even on Amazon, you can go on there and use all that stuff. I mean, I use medical grade UV lights in here. They're Ultra Vitalux 300 watt medical grade UV. They're actually 220 volt light bulbs. So I have a voltage converter running all of my lighting in this enclosure. And that was specifically because the zoo in Madrid, Spain, that bred the croc monitors, that was the lighting that they were using. And that UV lighting is literally, they use it in hospitals and stuff to stimulate cell growth and stuff like that. So it's like a very good spectrum with high concentration UV. But those bulbs are like $55 a piece, which is kind of, but what's crazy is like, that's what a normal UV bulb used to cost. Now you can get one for like 20.
Yeah, but
you know,
but $55 is not a lot.
No, it's not that bad. It's just that when you look at, I think when people look at $55 and then they look at someone like Nerd who uses flood bulbs, there's no reason to spend the money, right?
But like, here's the but I look at that as you see somebody go into Starbucks and spend $12 on a cup of coffee.
It's the American way.
I can't wrap listen, to each their own, and however you feel, keep your animal. But for when you're talking medical grade lighting, in my mind, but the wheels are turning, going, Jesus, those have to be $400 or $500 a bulb. $55 a bulb is ridiculous. That doesn't make any sense why somebody wouldn't want the best for their animal.
No, it doesn't make sense, but it all starts at the top. When you have people that are telling everyone with their reach that the animals don't need something, and the only reason that they're saying that they don't need that is because they're not giving it to them.
Yeah.
You know, that's the only reason. I mean, you look at the people who aren't giving their animals UV, 100% of them are going to say that the animals don't need UV. Because what are they going to do? Tell you that they're not giving them UV and they need UV?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. It's the same reason why nobody microchips their animals except for me and Ty Park. Those microchips are less than $7 for each animal to microchip them, which allows you to keep track of all of our DNA testing that we do. We can trace that right back to that exact same animal. It allows me to I get phone calls all the time from people who are like, hey, I'm getting 100% het from so-and-so. Did you sell him a 100% het black dragon or a black dragon, this and that? And I'm like, dude, just take it to the vet and get it scanned.
Yeah.
All of our animals in the left rear thigh have a microchip. It's a 15-digit ISO microchip. It's a 10-gauge needle, smallest microchip they have. And that's 100% traceability for every animal that comes out of my
we had to have
program.
all of our retics here and Berm's microchip too. So
yeah, it's just a good practice.
Simple.
It doesn't hurt anything.
No.
And it's super simple. You can do it yourself. And I do all the animals here. And the San Diego Zoo wanted us to put them in the left rear thigh because that's where they microchip all their animals.
Okay.
But it's just one of those things where it's not about the cost. It's just not. It's not about the cost. It's just a matter of the people who are saying that they don't need them or whatever. It's just them typing on a computer and saying words. And then the other people are typing on a computer and saying words.
Yeah. It's
and then
just,
nothing
it's
ever gets
words,
done.
words. Nothing makes sense.
Yeah, and then nobody goes to the store and gets
Yeah.
what they need to get. Like, it's just a complete lack of action. That's all it is. I mean, it's a stupid argument. I mean, it really is.
Well, you go back to people say, and listen, I'm guilty of this. I keep the snake. I had a 16-foot retic in a 3-foot by 8-foot by 18-inch cage, and she ate, she defecated, she shed, she bred, she laid eggs. She had no issues. She was fantastic. You could take her out. She was super simple to work with. When I took the eggs out, she had no issues with me. You know, she was super, super calm, little jumpy, but never opened her mouth, never struck at me, nothing. Was I keeping her at optimal condition, or was I just keeping her at the absolute minimal that she needed to get by? And let's face fact, in the wild, these animals are programmed for one thing: to breed and to reproduce.
Yeah.
So did I keep her just at that lowest point, or did she have a really good life? And, you know, those are the questions and you hear people say, well, it must be good enough because they're breeding. Well, okay.
Yeah, but that's a horrible data set to set your to use to kind of validate your successes, especially with reptiles. It's like there's a couple things that they're programmed to do, to eat and breed, and then they have some other things like life-saving things that they're programmed to do, like the monitors find the light and whatever. But ultimately, here's what I always look back to. There was some studies that were done with the Argus monitors where they were trying to produce some animals parthenogenically. Well, with parthenogenesis, like we've proven here, you need a certain stressor to get an animal to reproduce asexually or atypically, whatever you believe in.
Yeah.
So parthenogenesis will occur if you have, a lot of times it's a failed natural breeding, or if you breed two animals together where you have an animal that's not fertile and then you have a female that is fertile. They think they're being mated to and bred to, and they'll naturally fertilize their own eggs. So if you stress an animal out, it will produce parthenogenically. So you could just as easily argue that the reason that these animals are breeding is because they are so stressed out from the way that you're keeping them, not the opposite. So in fact, there's probably a lot more data that shows that the animals under stress are more willing to breed because they're in a survival situation. So they want to procreate. They think that their genetic pool is going to stop with them. So it's just as easy to argue that the conditions that you have them in are not sufficient. Just like you have no idea of knowing whether that retic or whatever you have was going to be a 35-foot record-breaking retic.
Yeah.
You know, there's so many variables involved in keeping animals, you know, that if all you're using is, you know, that it eats and drinks and poops and breeds, those are all normal survival things that any animal has that's alive.
Yeah.
So the only thing that I can say is that generally with the monitor lizards anyway, and some of the higher end monitors and harder to keep monitors like the croc monitors, it is such a pain to get them to, it's not the breeding that's hard because the animals will breed.
Yeah.
It's just getting the female to where she'll lay the eggs, which I think takes a certain level of comfort from the animal in the environment, which I had proven just because the female that I hadn't produced eggs before she got here. So I kind of proved that. But then you also have animals that are obviously more susceptible to being comfortable in captivity. Some animals just flat out don't take to captivity. They have a failure to thrive. I mean, that's the whole reason why we have the term failure to thrive, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, it's luck of the draw still. I mean, it's really easy for everybody to take credit and then to, you know, throw a wrench into criticism and say, hey, I produced this and this, has got to be doing okay. It's like, yeah, but you don't know how good you could be doing. I mean, look at Nerd, for example. With all the resources that they have, they could be doing so much better. So much better. You know, like I produce at least 10 times as many black dragons as they do every year. And you know how many females I breed? One. I have one black dragon female, Onyx, and she lays 18 to 24 eggs at a crack every 3 months. That's it. So I put more resources into a single animal, they pick up on that, and they produce more. If I'm feeding, generally, my monitors will lay as many eggs as food items that they eat throughout the week, right?
Okay.
So my female black dragon Onyx, she'll generally eat about 10 chicks at a time, and she eats twice a week, every Wednesday and Saturday. So you look at like these other people who are taking a minimalistic approach, and they obviously have a bottom line and they're running a business, which is fine. And I'm not trying to shit on Kevin.
Yeah.
But that's his fault for being kind of the standard here, you know? So
yeah, for sure.
So I always kind of defer back to that, but he's feeding his animals at a bare minimum because he doesn't know which animals are going to produce. And for him, if an animal's not producing, then that's a waste of resources, right?
Yep.
So you can't dump a bunch of food into 10 animals and then you're like, dude, 9 of them didn't produce. I only had 1 that produced. I wasted all that food and energy on these other 9. Now I'm wasting money off the top end of my business to bring myself back up to 0 just so I can feed everybody else. And I understand that, but you have to take a risk somewhere, and you have to have enough belief in your own breeding capabilities to where you think that you're not taking that much risk, right? I mean, I know for a fact that I can get any female water monitor to breed in my setups. I've done it a million times. I've even brought in other people's females that they couldn't get to cycle, brought them in here and had them cycling within 2 months and then sent them back. So I have enough confidence in the way that I do things to know where my limits are and where I can work things. And for somebody that's been doing breeding for so long with so many accolades and, you know, produce so many animals, how are you not mitigating your risk with your experience? It doesn't make sense. It just flat out doesn't make sense. Either you don't have any idea what you're doing and you still don't have any idea what kind of cues you're giving the animals that make them breed, or you just flat out are not willing to put in the resources, period, regardless of whether you thought they would pay off or not.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, people think I breed a bunch of lizards here. I don't. I have a breeding pair of each species I have a breeding pair of lace, a breeding pair of crocs, and a breeding pair of black dragons. And then I have Yoshi, who's old as hell, who I don't really breed.
Yeah.
So, you know, so it's just one of those things where, you know, I think the juice is worth the squeeze at the end of the day. Yeah.
I'm texting my son because I can hear the TV through my headphones. I'm gonna kill him.
Well, I can't hear it, so.
Okay, good. So I've like I said, I followed you for quite a while, and very, very interesting that you've taken the approach of the science part of it, because not very many people in the reptile industry are interested in the science. And I think I've changed and shifted from, I want to breed snakes and sell babies and make money in this industry. And at the end of the day, you know, this year I decided I was going to just kind of change my train of thought and be more on the conservation side. And I have super high social anxiety. So when I started doing these interviews, my anxiety is through the roof, and I've gotten so much more comfortable now, and I'm having so much fun with it. I've even told my wife, like, we just purchased a house and we're in the process right now of getting things ready to move next week. And I've even told her, it's like, I kind of want to utilize this room that I have instead of for animals, but to be able to film and do more interviews and still keep things. But the traction, I'll say, that you've gained with this, I think is amazing. And the point that you take, and I say this all the time, Kevin, I like Kevin. I love the guys there. Their crew is great. I've met a bunch of them. We've all hung out. We've been to Nerd with one of their tours. I love the guys, but I see what you're saying. And it's a difference when you're running a business as opposed to doing something that you truly love. And sometimes, like, that's what Kevin really loves, and his passion is there. It sucks that he's kind of got himself landlocked in a building that he could do 10 times better in. And, I've told my wife, hey, look, Cory just posted, just had 20 more eggs laid. Well, look, posted again, just had 20 more eggs laid. And my wife is like, those are almost $3,000 a piece. And she just looks at me and she says, what the hell are you doing wrong?
Well, that's what's crazy is that, like, and thank you. I appreciate all of your positivity. It makes me feel like I'm doing more than I think I actually am. Like, in all reality, all I'm doing is when I'm interested in something, like, I go out and I do the work and I figure it out. And if it costs money, I'll spend money, because for me, I am interested in the data. I'm not here for the prestige or whatever. I mean, dude, at the end of the day, I have lizards breeding in a barn in my front yard. Like, this, I'm not curing cancer. This shit is not like that awesome. Like, it's cool and all and gives me something to do. But for some of these guys, they just don't have anything else. They haven't been good at anything else. They literally can't do anything else. And as far as the science goes, it's like, there are so many people, Kevin included, who want to pretend like they understand the science. And they just flat out don't. They can't even reference any of the science, and they haven't read any of the materials. Mm-hmm. I mean, literally, when I started doing my relatedness testing at Therion DNA, which is in New York, they are the largest DNA testers, a private DNA testing facility. Kevin was just trying to be, passive aggressive like he does. And I've literally never even spoken to Kevin, which is just hilarious. I'd be happy if he called me.
Yeah. Kevin, did you hear that?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. He's never going to do it because he would think it's like talking down to him or below him or something or whatever. But I got to wear some wife beaters. Maybe I can get him to. So it's like he had said something passive aggressively like, oh, well, where are you getting your DNA testing done? We've been trying to get testing done for blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, dude, it's at Therion DNA. It's literally like by you guys.
Yeah.
Like, I have to ship samples across the United States.
Yeah.
You guys just aren't doing the legwork. You didn't even Google. You couldn't even Google.
Yep. And
that's all it is. It has nothing to do with the resources not being there. It has to do with you just not going to get the resources.
Yep. So obviously, I love venomous snakes, as you can see from our background.
I hate snakes.
I know. So I know you're not a snake guy. I know.
I'm like the Indiana Jones of the reptile trade. I just can't stand it. I can't stand it, man. I will tackle a 50-foot crocodile, but if you try to hand me a ball python, I will kick you in the shin and run away. That's just how it is. I don't care. That's just how it is.
Yeah, no, there's nothing.
I wish I was into snakes. You know how many ball pythons I could have in here?
Oh yeah, you have a million. I could just imagine. But when you look at this is very similar. So you talk about DNA testing. One of the big things with venomous snakes is, and this was, here in Florida, you have to have a permit. You have to put 1,000 hours in per species or take a test at 500 hours. So I did the 500 hours for Viperidae and Elapidae and for each, and I took the exam and passed, and now I can get my permit. So, but one of the things that we all in our group talk about is it safe to keep, let's just say, a green mamba without having access to antivenom? Probably not. We're lucky here in Florida because we have Venom 1 and Ben Abo, one of the best doctors in the country. Yeah. So, we're it's a little better, but the reliance on somebody else's antivenom, and this is something that we fight hard for. If somebody in the private sector is keeping a venomous snake and they take a bite and they have to take a zoo's antivenom, what if a zookeeper takes a bite and that was meant for them and they pass on or die, or even, you know, they're maimed or whatever the case may be? So to get your IND, the experimental drug license, is a stack of paperwork because you have to deal with the FDA. Now, I work in pharmaceuticals, so I deal with the FDA. Everything that they do is ass backwards and upside down and a pain in the butt. So, but you can do it. You can take that time. The Kentucky Reptile Zoo, they have all the information. All you have to do is ask Kristen Wiley. She'll give you everything, how to fill it out, what steps to take. It takes time, but you still hear venomous keepers saying, oh, it's not worth doing because it takes too much time. Well, when you go to the hospital because you took that bite and you don't have your own antivenom, which incidentally you get for $50 to $100 a vial, but when you go to the hospital, they charge you $7,500 a vial.
Yep.
So you didn't take that. The permit's free. Doesn't even cost anything. So when you look at, like you just said, the laziness in this industry and in this hobby, it's so much easier to put somebody down, shit on somebody that's trying to do the right thing. It's unbelievable. And like I said, not to keep saying the same thing, but following you and seeing what you've done and then listening and seeing some of the posts, it's like, how can you debate any of it? You really can't. Success is there.
I mean, it's easy to have a logical approach when you're dealing with illogical people constantly. You know, it's like there's no logical solution to an illogical problem. You know, it's like the issue is with the keeper, not with the information or the resources
or the animal.
So you have, like in the case that you're talking about, all of that usually stems from somebody calling somebody else and asking them about it. And then they say, oh, I looked into it one time, but it's just going to be a huge pain in the ass. I talked to blah, blah, blah. And they said they tried to do it and they fucking shot him in the face, you know, or something. Like it's always they failed
insane, to fill out a piece of paper.
Yeah. It's always like some insane once in a lifetime circumstance that happened to one person. And they're just using it to fend off everybody.
Yeah.
You know, and in reality, if the person who had originally asked the other guy, if they would have just gone on to do their own research, they would have then become their own precedent for other people to ask. And then they would have been doing like what you're doing, where you say, dude, it wasn't that big of a deal. I mean, it's just a process like it is for everything else. But in the instant form of everything that we get as a consumer now, where we can just call somebody, ask them, they'll tell us exactly what to do step by step. And then I just give this guy money. He ships me an animal. I open the box, super cool. I put it in a drawer and I feed it every week. And that's all I want to do. I don't want to do the work or do the research. You know, you just have a lot of people that are stuck in their ways and who are totally against supporting a new wave of keeping. So it's like, it's constant discouragement. And then the only thing they encourage is more discouragement.
Yeah. And listen, I said, I work in pharmaceuticals, and this is a thing that we deal with daily as time changes, people are so set in their ways that any type of change they don't want to be a part of. Or they fight tooth and nail because it's different. It's just not the way they envision or see it. And like I said, I mean, I say this all the time. I'm heavily against free handling of venomous snakes. It is one of the worst. You're against handling any snake. It's the worst practice out there because it only takes. It's like picking up a gun. I say this.
That's what I've always said. I've always used that analogy because
this is my analogy.
Who keep friggin' rattlesnakes and stuff, and I'm like, dude, it's like handling a loaded gun, and you don't know where the trigger's at.
Yeah, exactly. so I tell people in my shows that over on my nightstand I have a 9mm, and would you pick my 9mm up and hold it to your head and pull the trigger? God, I hope not. God, I hope
I wouldn't
not,
even touch it. I wouldn't even touch it.
because at the end of the day, I keep a round chambered in all of my handguns because that's what they're here for, home protection. I am not going to rack something and shoot at you. I am going to shoot at you. So
Yeah.
I always tell people, if that's the case, when you pick that snake up, sure, you might know it, just like you know your monitors, you know that animal, but that one time that you take that slight liberty with that big croc monitor and it just doesn't like what you're doing and it takes a swipe at you, it could be detrimental. It could be life-changing.
Yeah, there's no room for error because the animals don't take days off.
No.
You know, evolution doesn't take a day off. Period.
I like that.
So there's no room for error at all with the animals. Plus, when you have somebody else coming in, it's a completely new entity, new smells, new sounds, new movements, new everything. If you think that, especially in my case, if you think that the animals don't get to know me and my habits, that's fucking crazy. You know, they all know as soon as I walk in the building with an orange bucket that they're getting fed, they all come down out of their basking areas and come down to the doors.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't teach them that stuff. They just pick up on it.
Yep.
Same thing with the croc monitors, know that every once in a while that if I grab them by the tail, I'm going to be sliding my hand under their belly next. So they literally push themselves up on their hands now, like a push-up to give me more room so I can get underneath them. And then like even little stuff like, so I had this with MJ Exotics Cartel or something like that. He's local. Well, he came up and he was taking pictures of Onyx, my black dragon, who's puppy dog tame. Like when I have kids come and visit the facility, I always take her out. Well, he was close enough with his cell phone to where she saw the reflection on the lens. And naturally, a lens on a phone looks like an eyeball.
Yep.
So she thinks it's an animal. So she opens her mouth and tries to bite his phone. She just thought she was being fed. It had nothing to do with her being aggressive.
No.
It just has to do with evolution. They're wired, or if they see food, especially in a captive environment. I mean, we have issues where, especially with the avian species, their neck muscles don't get developed because we don't feed live food. Mm-hmm. So there's things that we have to do to mitigate that, where I'll literally play tug of war with the animal sometimes when they get fed. Usually with the chicken breasts, because if I use like a chick, it's not strong enough. But if I get a hold of a chicken breast, I can get them to grab on it and they'll play tug of war a little bit. But you'll have issues where if you have an animal that falls down and lands on its neck from only even like 6 or 8 feet, it'll break its neck because it just doesn't have the musculature around the bones to keep them safe, because they've never had to grab an animal and shake it and develop those muscles. It's the same reason why it's really hard to get saliva samples from a captive animal as well, because you have their salivary gland, and especially with the Komodos and I believe the black throat monitors as well, and then obviously the crocs. Well, their salivary gland has to be massaged by the jaw muscles. That's why it secretes.
Okay.
So when they're chewing on an animal and chomping on it and grabbing it really hard, they're constantly squeezing those jaw muscles and they get really big. Okay. And obviously your jaw muscles get bigger the more you use them. So they're now providing more pressure on those salivary glands, stimulating them, and they produce a lot more saliva, or in the case of the Komodos and some other species, a lot more venomous, venom. So it's like there are so many things that monitor keepers don't ever talk about. Those are things right there that most people don't pick up on. They just
I would never listen. I've never heard that, and it's interesting that you say that. We have a Savannah monitor, and once in a while I'll take, like when I trim up chicken and stuff, I'll take the pieces of trimmings out there, but I make him run, or I'll put him on the tongs and make him run around the cage, and I'll pull and tug of war with him because it's fun, and he seems to really enjoy it. He seems to really, he likes that, tugging and shaking his head. But I never thought that I was doing anything positive. I always thought, I think it's interesting to see him act as if he's hunting for something. And that's how I always took it. So it's cool to hear that something like that is important to do. And I think at the end of the day, as reptile keepers, we need to pay more attention to our animals and have things like this, you know, these platforms. And I've always said this, there's so many good podcasts and good YouTube videos and good YouTube people that if they can just get the right information out there, things would be so much better. But unfortunately, you get a lot of misinformation or not completely accurate information because people don't take the time to Google, read a paper, read a book, you know, or ask or talk to somebody. You know, this right here, this conversation, somebody may watch this and say, holy cow, that happened to my animal. I can tell you, years ago, I had a friend of mine that bought a water monitor from Pro Exotic, just a hatchling import, very small, raised it up. It was almost 7 feet long. We built a room in the basement for it, 8 foot tall, 8 foot deep, and 10 foot long. And one day Jason went down there and he was dead. And we couldn't figure out what it was. And we were looking at the inside and there's all these claw marks all the way up to the top and then nothing. And that's where he found him, was right below that. So the thought is that he climbed up and fell and he hurt himself. And it's shocking to hear you say that, because now it's like, yeah, you know what? He never fed him live because he was always told that if you fed him live, he'd be more aggressive. So he always fed him pre-killed stuff or, you know, just out of a bowl. And maybe that was what it was.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you have animals who are being like, you know, like that animal probably would have never been 7 feet that fast in the wild.
Yeah.
You know,
he was, listen, he was probably 5 or 6 years old at that point.
Yeah.
You know?
But still, like, there's no real like natural selection process in captivity, right? So it's like you have an animal who is probably much heavier, is what I'm really getting at. Much heavier than it was definitely if it was in. So then you have all of that. You figure if you have a water monitor that's even 5 pounds overweight, that's damn near 20% of its body mass.
Yeah.
That is like a severely obese human.
Yeah. No, and that makes more sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you have that animal and it's up there and it's probably using its tail to help it get up there, and then it falls backwards, lands on its neck or kicks its neck, because the monitors try to look over their back when they fall backwards. Mm-hmm. They don't tuck their head like we do. Yeah. They try to literally create a sight line behind them, and they'll fold their neck right underneath and they'll snap their necks. I've seen it happen a bunch, and it's always because of that. I mean, I definitely would never feed my animals live food. It has nothing to do with them being more aggressive. It's just that I'm willing to put in the time to mitigate those issues that may come around if I didn't feed them live food, like, you know, the development of their neck muscles. There's other things I can do. Plus, I'm just not going to have a bunch of live feeders around. There's just no way. I feed these guys like 150 chicks a week. Whew. There's just no way that I can keep all that around here. It's just ridiculous. I mean, I'll come in here with 75 chicks in a bucket and feed everybody. Mm. So, it's just not feasible for me to do that. But it's just one of those things where, like, even with the DNA and all the other little things, like, so many people pretend like they know everything about this stuff, and they've never even considered these things.
Yeah.
And they would never consider them enough to think that they were a teaching point. So the information is definitely out there. And, you know, another testament to kind of how sad it is in the reptile keeping trade where people aren't using their resources is just the fact that I spent over $10,000 building that DNA testing protocol over there at Therion DNA for relatedness for our parthenogenic project, and we do sexing over there as well as at UC Davis. Mm-hmm. You know how many people have submitted DNA samples to that project? 0. Not a single person has ever submitted any DNA samples to that whole project. And you know what's funny is you don't even have to send blood. You can pull off a piece of skin and put it in an envelope and send it to Therion. They can test it that way. You know, like, they just don't do any of it. Mm-hmm. It's really cool to have these things that you can talk about on the internet, which is another reason why I don't belong to any of the forums. But it just literally sucks all the fun out of everything. I can tell you that 100% of the people who have ever said anything bad about me on the internet have never called me. I've never spoken to them on the phone. Of course. My cell phone number is always posted. I'm always willing to have a conversation with someone. I'm always willing to help somebody out. And, You know, I've gotten so many customers from people that just have had bad experiences with other breeders. You know, like they're just like, dude, I got this socialized lizard from blah, 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 and it's totally mean and this and that. I'm like, yeah, that's because there's no socialization protocol. Like all you're doing is exhausting the animals out and making them depressed. Those animals aren't tame, they're depressed. If their tails were long enough, they would have hung themselves. Like, you know,
That's
like
crazy.
seriously. It's not.
Yeah,
Like, when I see videos of people socializing lizards and I look and see that they're literally in a tub of water and they've been swimming trying to keep from drowning for God knows how long, and then you reach in and you pick them up and you're like, oh, look at how tame it is, so socialized. It's fucking exhausted, and you are its only line of hope for land.
Yeah.
You are the first person that's come in there and grabbed it and made it feel secure, because it's not thinking it's going to drown in a bucket of water. It's the same principle as crabs in a bucket. It is literally the exact same analogy as crabs in a bucket. If you put crabs in a bucket, none of them will get out because they constantly try to climb over each other to try to get out. And then they all fall off. It is the exact same thing when you put a bunch of water monitor lizards in a tote with 4 inches of water in the bottom. It is literally like crabs in a bucket. They get exhausted, and then you go in there and you save them every time. Yeah. So you're forcing them to get exhausted, and then you're claiming it's socialization. It is ridiculous. It is this along the same lines as breaking a wild horse. You're just getting that horse broken enough to where you literally becomes domesticated because it's so depressed.
Yeah. And it's funny that retics are the same way. Very, very smart snakes. We had a really nice pair from Stephen Tillis. Just absolutely just puppies. And we added a couple more animals. And one of the animals that we added was another one from him that he had raised very slow. She wasn't huge. And she was way more on the sketchy side, if that's the best way to put it. She was either hot or cold. She was never in the middle. You either could get her out of the cage easy and she was easy to work with, or she held her ground. And you know what? You're going to hold your ground. I'm going to shut the door and I'll work with you another day when you're in a better mood. But that same mentality that you watch some of these other breeders, they're like, oh, if you just handle this and do that and take the animal and do this. And no, that's just, you know what? I had a big 14-foot sun tiger female that, you know, she's a great animal, but she didn't like to be messed with. So when you had to pull her out for something, it was go in a circle this way, go in a circle this way, go in a circle this way, and hope to God she doesn't get a hold of you because she's trying to bite you. But as long as you maneuver her and get her into – the only time we took her out of that cage was to clean it or to soak her. She never had to come out for anything else. That was it. It was to clean it or to soak her. So I would take her out and get her into a bin and clean the cage. And when you took her back out of the water, you knew that, oh, I'm going to go throw swim trunks on because you're getting wet. You're getting crapped on. She's going to freak out. That's just the way that it was. And people can say what they want. I, in my mind, don't believe in any of that. If you do this or do that, it's gonna make the animal be friendly. And I just don't believe that. I believe in my mind that animal tolerates you at some point, and that's it. You're tolerated.
Well, it's just ridiculous to have the same expectation for every animal. The same temperament expectation for every animal. It's just
we're all
ridiculous.
Different.
Yeah, if I like all of my males in here that I breed are all wild caught, with the exception of the lace because you can't get them wild caught.
Yeah.
I would never expect those animals to be tame. You know what I expect from them? I expect that they'll breed and hopefully they'll eat.
Yeah.
That's it. Those are my expectations because it's ridiculous. I would never hit somebody up and be like, hey, yeah, I saw you got a wild caught croc monitor and it looks pretty tame. How did you do that? Because, you know, all croc monitors are the same. They all probably came from the exact same area. They're probably literally twins, right? So they should work the exact same. It just doesn't make any sense. I mean, it's something cool that you can tell yourself to make you feel better about spending the money on an animal that is not ever going to live up to your expectations. But to be honest, my keeping is never going to live up to the expectations of the animals either. They want to be in the fucking wild.
Yeah.
My croc monitor wants to go chase down monkeys in Papua New Guinea.
Yeah.
So why are you expecting all this from your animals, and then you're giving them subpar conditions? You're not giving them UV. You're regulating their food. You're not letting them breed when they want. You're not letting them do whatever. You give them small enclosures. Like, dude, you got to meet them halfway. There's a trust that gets built. It gets built. It doesn't get built off nothing. You have to set a foundation.
Yep.
You know, and sometimes that foundation is really bad. And you got to build the foundation first. But then sometimes you get an animal where the foundation's already laid, and then you just start building the structure.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's just one of those things where I don't understand why people do that stuff. It just doesn't make sense. Like, it's along the same lines as when people say that they really want to get into breeding and then they buy hatchlings. And I'm like, why are you buying a lizard that can't breed if you really want to get into breeding?
Yep.
I've never bought a hatchling. I've never bought one, aside from Yoshi, but she was like 2 years old when I got her.
Yeah, yeah.
So she was like a sub-adult. But I literally don't buy hatchlings. I don't keep any animals here. I don't have any stock that I keep to raise up to breed more. That's against everything I do. I don't line breed anything here. So I don't keep baby lizards. I don't want them. If I want a breeding project with like a T positive or T negative albino water monitor, I find an adult T positive or T negative, and then I buy it and bring it in. You can't breed a baby. You can't breed a subadult. There's no way. It doesn't make sense. So if you want to do a breeding project, your expectations should be just that. You want to bring in an animal that can breed. You're not going to be getting anything else. So I brought in my Thailand imports and Papua New Guinea imports and all that stuff specifically for breeding. So I bring them in and I put them through a breeding regimen to see if they're paired up with my females that I have, to make sure they're eating well. I get them all treated, get fecals done at the vet, get x-rays done to confirm sex, confirm health. And then I start working them into a breeding program. That's just how it is. I would never have an expectation ever that any of those animals would ever be tamed, nor would I ever want to have the opportunity to interact with them enough to tame them down. Because for all I know, like honestly, all this stuff in here, like I spend a lot of time in engineering to make 90% of it automated. The only time I interact with the animals is when I do random spot cleanings in the cage and when I feed them. That's it. I don't come in here and hang out with the animals and touch them and mess with them.
You don't cuddle with them?
Because honestly, no. And you
no
know,
spooning.
There's no Netflix on the TV in the lizard building. So it's like they have a purpose, and but I give them everything they could possibly need as far as I'm concerned. And they have huge enclosures. So like they want to be left alone basically. Like, and when they are interacting, it's a positive interaction of breeding, which they're usually more than happy to do. None of my breedings are aggressive or anything. If you're having aggressive breeding experiences, like you've seen some of the animals in the background at Nerd that look like they're extras from the movie Gladiator. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, man, get your shit together. Do you not know how to use a calendar or an ultrasound? That's all the resources you say you have and all the money that you supposedly spend on all these animals.
Yeah.
You can't just like get an ultrasound machine and like check the animals to see if they're, you know.
So let me ask you this. That aggressive breeding is generally due to a female not being in cycle at that point. Generally, listen, everybody, before you freak out and post something stupid, I'm saying generally.
Yeah, in my case, 100% of the time.
Okay. So because somebody's going to see this and they're going to be like, oh, like it's going to be that way every time. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm asking in general. Is it
every single time that my timing is correct, which is usually very often, I don't have any aggressive interactions. And in fact, if I do have an aggressive interaction, I know my timing is wrong. and I separate the animals right away. You can tell whether you're going to have a bad interaction as soon as the animals see each other.
Okay.
As soon as the animals see each other. Because they're either going to slow down and start head bobbing, in which case, okay, timing's good, and I should be okay, and I'll back out around the corner, and I have peepholes in all the enclosures.
Yeah.
So they can't see me, and I can still keep an eye on them, and obviously I have the cameras too.
Yeah.
But there is like a 30-second delay, and the building is like 50 feet from the house, so generally I stay in here. If they get like, if they lock eyes and they start running, that's a negative interaction. Grab their tails, you know, like I always have my big welding gloves on that come up past my elbows.
Okay.
And I've had to break up animals before, especially in the beginning where you're trying to figure out your timing. Because even on all of our x-ray cycles of the croc monitors, a croc monitor can do a lot of damage, and not even talking about the big male. It's usually the smaller female that does the most damage. They'll grab onto the male's jaw and they'll break their fucking jaw, and they won't be able to eat, and they'll die. So, and that happens all the time. I've heard tons of horror stories about it, which is why I've never had it happen here, because I've always been really careful. But even with x-rays and verifying follicle growth and follicle size and all that stuff, ultimately, your ultimate information is going to come from you getting to know that animal and watching the interactions as soon as the male comes in or while they're separated. So I know for a fact that Onyx is ready to breed exactly 30 days after she laid her last clutch.
Okay.
But on top of that, I know that Onyx is ready to breed because she'll be trying to get out of the enclosure, which she never does. Okay. So she will literally, within coming up to a couple days before 30 days, she will dig really shallow BS burrows, like 6 inches deep, just in the corners of the enclosure. She'll move dirt around. And then she'll literally hang out on top of her lay box area. Like she'll sit up there for no reason. And then when I'm in here cleaning the enclosures, you can hear scratching because she's clawing at the Lexan on the door.
Okay.
She wants to get out. So I know that my 30-day time period is up, and I have her behavioral cues to substantiate me actually putting her in with the male. So I know that I have a really good chance of her being in a breeding mode when I put them together. But if I just go off of my 30 days and I just put them together, that's ridiculous. That's, once again, you not using all your resources.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing with the croc monitors. The croc monitor females, I know that they will refuse food 4 days before they'll want to breed. Then on top of that, I always wait. The same thing happens with the male, where he will now hang out on the bottom of the cage instead of the top because he knows that the female's ready to breed next door. He can literally sense it.
Yeah.
So
sure.
He's on the bottom of the cage because he knows that that's where the doggy door is that goes through to the other cage. I always have it closed.
Yeah.
But I know that he is now sensing something. Her biologics are now telling me that there's something going on because she's refusing food. And then also she will stay up high in the enclosure. So he's coming down because he wants to breed because he knows the door's down there. At least this is what I think it is. Because obviously I don't know. I'm not a lizard.
Yeah, guys, he doesn't talk to lizards, just so you know.
I mean, I do, but they don't talk back.
Yeah.
It's like the same.
It sucks,
it's like prayer.
It? Yeah.
It's like prayer. It's the same thing. So then, so like even right now, you can see behind me, the croc monitor is down right there. So he's like midway up the enclosure.
Yep.
Well, he's self-regulating temperature right now, but the female, she'll sit up way up tall below the basking area, but up on that 8-foot shelf that I have in there.
Yep.
So that's when I know that she's kind of out and about, like she wants to be seen. She wants to be bred.
Yeah.
And the male's down here because he wants to go over there.
Yeah.
So I wait for a couple of cues from both sides of the spectrum, because if I just listen to him, for all I know, he just wants to bang.
He's just a horny bastard.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't blame him.
Yeah.
I don't blame him.
Right.
You know, I don't always do it to procreate.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm just practicing.
Exactly.
So
that's what I'm saying.
It's just one of those things where there is a ton of information, but if you have small closet size enclosures, like someone we know, with what do they call them? Dutch doors on the front and no windows. How could you possibly pick up on any of this stuff?
Mm-hmm.
How could you possibly pick up on the fact that your animal is doing something a little bit different? And then, oh, wow, I saw her do that last time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, or, oh, wow, I saw her do that 2 weeks after I tried to breed them when they killed each other.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I should have waited another 2 weeks. Oh, okay. Well, that makes sense. And then you pick up on those cues and then you use them the next time. And ultimately, it is way safer for the animal. And the animals are much more willing to breed because they're not healing from a battle in between, which is going to ruin any cycle you have whatsoever. The animals are not going to divert resources to a clutch when they think that they need those resources to survive and heal a giant gash in their arm or in the base of their tail or on their neck. They're going to choose to use that shit for survival. And the animals, especially monitor lizards, they have so much control over their reproductive system. It is insane.
Yeah. Now how are the croc monitors doing? Have you gotten fertile eggs? Okay.
Yeah, so we had a clutch of fertiles last year. I think, I don't remember the month, but they're actually set to hatch end of this month or beginning of next month. So we had 6 eggs, 3 of them were fertile. And she's cycling again right now. I bred her again a couple weeks ago. And so we'll see if she lays again. I mean, hopefully she lays again this year. She should lay hopefully twice before the end of the year. The lace monitors are on a similar schedule, so they'll usually lay 2 clutches in a year.
Okay.
She just actually laid another clutch a couple weeks ago. And then Onyx is ready to breed as of tomorrow, so she's going to go in for breeding tomorrow, and she should lay another friggin' gigantic, putting everybody to shame clutch again.
Yes. Yeah, I have to say that's unbelievable.
It's just funny because it is literally a 30-day block. Like, so she lays eggs, 30 days later, I breed her. 30 days after that, she lays eggs. 30 days after that, I breed her. 30 days after that, she lays eggs. So like almost every 2 months would give or take a couple weeks in between there. So she'll lay 3 or 4 clutches a year usually. So it's like, I just don't understand how people are having their animals like battle it out and all this shit. It's like, dude, it couldn't be any easier. Like I have videos on how to set up your enclosures. It's completely temperature based. As long as your temps are the way that I have it set up, which is easy to do, you can get a thermometer, you know, but I think everybody just wants to get a box and put a UV bulb in there and that's it. And then they're like, oh my God, I've been keeping my lizard and it's been alive and pooping and I've been feeding it and it's getting big, but I haven't been able to breed. Yeah, that's because you haven't given it any reason to. It literally thinks it could die next week. It's barely been alive for the last 10 years.
Right. Now you said you've had Yoshi for a long time.
Yeah, I think 17 or 18 years now.
And you've retired her from your breeding program. She's more or less just kind of there because she's been there for all that time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what else I would do with her.
Well, well, here's the question. Does she still cycle and lay eggs? Because you hear people say with water monitors that if you're not breeding them, and I've heard people say this with retics too, if you're breeding an animal and then you stop breeding them, sometimes they'll become egg bound and it'll cause trouble.
No, not at all. She still lays eggs on a regular basis. She still wants to get bred. I just don't do it to her because she can barely walk. She's so old, you know, and she's had so many clutches that like her back legs just don't work as well as they used to. So her whole cage is handicap accessible. So like it literally is. So when she's full of eggs, she gets too buoyant and she'll literally like roll over on her back like a boat in the waves. Like it's sad. So, but yeah, the monitor lizards, you do not need a male monitor lizard around to get a female to cycle. And this is a ridiculous myth that I've told a million people where they're like, oh, I really want to breed, but I don't know how I should introduce my female to the male and blah, blah, blah. I'm looking to get a male. And I'm like, well, has your female laid eggs yet? Well, no. Okay, well, then you still got to do that, dude.
Yeah.
You know, like if you're keeping your female in a good environment, you want them to lay a clutch of infertiles first because number one, that proves that your enclosures and that you're keeping is going to be conducive to breeding.
Okay.
And then number two, it also proves that that female, like you alluded to, is not going to get egg bound. Because, you know, laying infertile eggs is way easier than laying fertiles.
Yeah, for
sure. It's like a bag of water.
Okay.
So it's like, so you really need to get a female, you get her cycling and laying eggs, and then you start your 30-day timer and you can keep track of her cycles. She'll continue to lay eggs, and then you bring in a male and you start your breeding project. I mean, it's real simple, but you can't just bring two animals in and start throwing them together, having them fight each other and bite each other, and then none of these people are taking their lizards to the vet.
Yeah.
They're not even going on Google to look stuff up, let alone making an appointment and driving an animal down there.
Yeah, for sure.
There's no way. So they're just letting the animals heal on their own, which for a water monitor is a pain in the ass because they're in the water all the time.
Yep.
And then they're ruining all their chances for future breedings because they're now creating a situation where you have two lizards who are now accustomed to kicking each other's asses every time they're together. So
I dated a girl like that once.
Yeah, dude, me too. And then we got married. So it is what it is. Hopefully she doesn't hear this. She's gonna kick my ass again.
Again, right. I'm just used to it now.
Still beat my ass.
Yeah, I'm numb to it. I wake up in the morning, I'm like, wow, why am I so sore? And my wife just gives me that look like, I don't know.
Yeah, she has a baseball bat next to the bed.
Bat hitting
Except
there.
for home defense? No, not unless I'm keeping my husband away from the home. Yeah.
So with the video that you just released, I'm sure there's a lot of people that are asking, you know, what's next on you know, your agenda as far as where you're at.
I mean, I don't have any animal related stuff next. I mean, I've always had a lot of stuff going on outside of the lizards. I mean, I work in engineering full time for the government. And then I also do, I race cars, I rock climb.
Okay.
And then my kids are getting older now where I'd like to do something that they can be more involved in. Because as it is right now, it's like, I do all this stuff by myself.
Yeah.
So I don't have anybody else in San Diego that can help me with this stuff. My brother will come over every once in a while. Like if I have if I have surgeries and stuff, he can like at least throw hard-boiled eggs in the enclosures, you know. But he's actually a really, really experienced reptile keeper. So
yeah, didn't you guys breed earless monitors together?
Yeah. So he basically bred all the earless monitors. He still breeds them, and then we just kind of marketed them and everything through my website and everything. That's actually how I started Toothless Reptiles, was actually just to do the earless monitors, and then I started posting pictures and stuff of the water monitors that I had, and people loved them. And then it like turned into this whole thing, and I realized like, oh shit, I've been doing this stuff for forever. I didn't realize people really cared about it. I've never been on social media or stuff like that. I've always just kind of done my own thing, which I still do now.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I just, I'd like to be honest, I really want to like try to breed some Parsons chameleons.
Yeah.
Because they're from Madagascar, and it takes like 2 years for them to incubate.
Yeah,
and it
24 to 28 months.
Dude, I'm like, that just sounds kind of cool. And my kids could like get involved because they're not going to lose a fucking arm.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So like literally now every Wednesday, my kids know that they can't schedule anything with me because as soon as I get home from work, I throw a bunch of food in to defrost. I take a shower, I come back out, feed everyone, try to get everybody watered and fed. Then every Saturday, I come back in here, do everything. And Sunday, also, I come back in here, water everything, and do a lot of cage maintenance. But it's like all of that has to be without my kids because it's just not safe.
It's dangerous, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so the only thing I'll ever have my son really help me with the animals is if I have to do anything with the croc monitor, the big male, I have him hold the door shut behind me. So I'm locked in the cage with him, and he's 16 feet up in the air, and I literally have to climb the walls and try to get a noose around his neck or try to catch him. It is horrible. I mean, I'm gonna die one of these days.
So no, stop. Now I will tell you this: as a chameleon, I've kept them. We've had panther chameleons, veiled chameleons, but we just bought a house, and one of the chameleon species that I've always wanted to work with are the carpet chameleons from Madagascar.
Oh, okay.
They're real small. but they have a shorter lifespan. But if you search carpet chameleons, the colors are unbelievable. And for needing small caging, I mean, small 18 by 24 by 12 inch, just little planted cages that you put these little chameleons in, and just the colors are amazing. Their attitudes are cool, you know, but like you said, those big Parsons, they're enormous. And the fact that they take anywhere from 18 to 28 months for eggs to hatch is incredible.
Yeah, it's pretty neat, and it kind of tickles my fancy as far as all the technical stuff, because when you incubate them, also you can regulate the temps with the seasons.
Yep.
Because they're in there for so long.
Yeah.
So it's like it would just be fun to kind of do that, and I can do some other stuff with this building, or just move and not have a building anymore. I don't need it.
Yeah.
I literally just bought this house so I could build this building on the property, and I've done everything I wanted to do as far as breeding all the animals. The black dragons are super easy to breed. The lace are really easy. The crocs weren't easy in the beginning, but it only took me a year to get fertile eggs.
Yeah. So you figured it out.
Yeah, so I figured it out, and I have a bunch of stuff written down on how hopefully other people can recreate that success as well. And then, I'm just kind of over it. You know, I've never really took to the culture behind it, I guess. Like, I don't go to reptile shows, really. Every once in a while, someone will invite me, and then I'll go. But aside from that, like, you know, I hardly talk to anybody that breeds reptiles. I've always just kind of done my own thing. And it'll just be more fun to do something the kids can be more involved in, so I don't have to do everything myself. Plus, I can build like a huge, nice planted screen enclosure and everything in a room in the house. And then the kids can like breed grasshoppers or whatever. And you know what's crazy is the Parsons will sit in trees and they'll actually pluck hummingbirds out of the air too.
Are you
ever
serious?
heard that?
No.
Dude. So there's people that live in Madagascar, and I was actually just having a conversation with Chris Murray about this the other day, but he was telling me, there's in Madagascar, there were some people who keep them in there. They're just in their trees in their front yard. And they'll eat friggin' hummingbirds. So they'll sit in trees that are like nectar-based trees, and the hummingbirds will come in to feed, and they'll friggin' eat the hummingbirds. They're like praying mantis. Have you ever seen praying mantis eat hummingbirds? Like, oh man,
that's insane.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
So and it just made me want one even more.
Yeah, right. He's gonna be out catching hummingbirds with a net. But no, that's, you know, Cory, it's awesome that the evolution is there, and I can agree with what you're saying with the kids, because I've always worked either in the dairy industry and worked night shifts, and now pharmaceutical on the pharma side of things. And as my passion for reptiles, you know, we've always tried to keep the kids involved. So this way we could go to a reptile show, go to a reptile function, and all of us be able to do it together, you know? So my daughter has ball pythons. My wife has boas. My oldest son had Burmese pythons. My youngest son has Uromastic, a Savannah monitor. He's got some carpet pythons. He's got a big Dumerils boa, you know? So, we kind of do it all together. And I could definitely see where if all I focused on was the retics, I would have very, very little help. Maybe the two boys, but my wife and my daughter would never be any part of that, because my wife was extremely nervous around them. My daughter completely no. So it's like, you see that evolution of, you know, okay, I did this. The kids were young, didn't matter because they were young. Now they're getting older. I want them to be involved. And, you know, I wanted my kids to be involved as well. So I know exactly how that feels.
Plus, you can't leave the house.
Yeah. Oh, like, yeah.
I don't have anyone who can take care of this if, God forbid, something happened.
Yeah.
So the longest I've ever been away from my house is 2 days in the last 15 years of doing all this stuff.
Jesus.
So I can take like 2 days where I like fly out to a race and then come back, or even like my honeymoon, we were gone for a couple days. It's like that's the longest I get, because you know, I even have internet, Wi-Fi based smoke detectors and CO2 alarms in here. Obviously, there's a giant fire suppression system in here as well. And then just with the animals, even if like a heat bulb takes a crap and I just fed the animals before I left, I'm like, dude, that thing's going to be septic by the time I get back. Yep. And how is anybody going to get in the enclosure to change it? Yeah. There's no way. Like, you're going to get attacked. So
I'm going to tell my wife about that, because she thinks that we're the only crazy ones that don't ever do anything. She thinks that we're the only ones that we can't do anything. It's the same thing. We've got 2 dogs. You know, we talk about this all the time. You know, we're in Orlando and we want to go to the Daytona Reptile Show and spend the weekend there. Who's going to take care of the animals? And it's like, I don't know. You know, so you either have a friend come over and do it and hope that it gets done right, or one half doesn't go. You know, so their idea is that maybe the girls will stay home and me and the boys will go for this one, and then the next thing that the girls will go do and me and the boys will stay home. And it's like, you know, you're right. You can't just pack up and leave for a week when you have animals, because it's not a matter of feeding. Like, I have snakes. I could feed on Sunday, leave on Sunday night, and they'll be fine for a week. But what if the power goes out? What if heat goes out during the winter? What if something happens? You know, you're right. You really can't leave that area.
Yeah, it gets to be a little much. Plus, even if you do have somebody that can take care of it, it's always on your mind. You literally can't even have fun. It's like when you take a day off work and you call in sick and you know that you're not sick. It ruins your day because you know you're supposed to be at work.
Yep.
Or when you show up to school and you don't have your homework and you know teacher's going to be like, hey, did you turn in your homework? And you're like, no.
Yeah. Yeah. You know
like,
that
it ruins
it's bad.
your whole day. Like, you're just waiting. Or like, you know, report cards are coming home and you're like, dude, my mom's going to beat my ass. Like, I can't even enjoy. I'm going to take 4 extra hits in football today because I'm not paying attention. Yeah. Because I'm so worried about my mom beat my ass when I get
Exactly.
And we have a bunch of power outages up here in Alpine also, because we're in a fire zone.
Okay.
So I have a giant generator that runs on propane that's connected to a 500-gallon propane tank. Woo. That's connected to the building. That propane tank is literally just for this building. So, dude, I spend around $20,000 on electricity for the building, and around the same just for propane every year. So, and that's just for the building. So It's like, you know, people are like, oh yeah, you got 20 black dragons. That's like $50,000. So, like, blah blah blah. Like, minus
the other
all
50,000.
of the other stuff. Yeah. You know, like, I'm lucky if I break even and then I have some money to totally waste on my car stuff and racing and whatever else I'm doing at the time.
Exactly.
So it's like, you know, it's cool and all, but it's just a self-fulfilling project. It's not like, I would never make this a full-time job. I would never do that. There's not enough to do, number one. I'd go nuts if I had to sit around and do all this shit all day.
Yeah.
And then number 2, there is nothing set in stone as far as breeding. So you would be inclined to end up with a setup similar to Nerd, to be honest, where you have a bunch more animals, hopefully increasing your odds, because you've now made a business. You now have a payment on a building. You now have employees.
Yep.
You now have all this stuff that has to get paid regardless of whether a lizard gets sick or decides that it doesn't want to produce any eggs anymore. You know, it's just, I would never want to do that. It's not.
I've always wanted to be in that part, but I've done the same thing you've said. I've kind of now pushed myself away from, I like this better. I have more fun with it. There are going to be some species that I'm going to keep. One of the reasons that I spent all this time for the last couple of years doing this venomous training was because I wanted to keep eyelash vipers. They're one of my favorite venomous snakes. So it's like, I want to have those animals in a naturalistic cage, planted. You know, you hardly ever have to mess with them. In 2 years, if you look over here, right there, that is a bilineata, and I'm sorry that it's cut off. But that's a baby. And for 2 years, I would ask Cody, I see the female, where's the male? Oh, he's in the log. Well, I've never seen him. Oh, he comes out like twice a year to eat. When he comes out and goes to the front of the cage, he's ready to eat. I feed him. He goes back into the log. 4 or 5 months later, he comes back out. He eats. He breeds her. He goes back into the log. That's it. I've seen that snake one time. He was right in the front. Cody goes, watch this. Put a rat in, grab the rat, eat. Where'd the male go? He's back in the log.
That's how the earless monitors are. They
Yeah.
don't do anything. They're
Yeah.
useless as animals. You can't interact with them because they're nocturnal and they get stressed out. They'll gator roll a worm. Like they'll literally grab onto a worm and they friggin' tug at it and go crazy and gator roll and tear off pieces and stuff. And that's like the most activity they have. But aside from that, they're like, they just hang out. Like
Yeah.
you can't really hold them or interact with them or anything. Even when we were interacting with them, you had a red filtered flashlight on your head like a tweaker.
Okay.
And you're in there like at nighttime when they're normally up and you're just trying to, you know, just kind of observe them from a distance. But yeah, it's one of those things. There's definitely a labor of love, but then if you try to turn it into a labor, you end up losing the love part.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So just have fun with it and enjoy what you're doing. So
yeah, and at this point, I'm just kind of not really enjoying it that much anymore.
Yeah.
It's turned into a chore. Like the last 6 months to a year, it's turned into a chore. And the only reason that I haven't sold everybody off before was just because of, honestly, just because of my connection to the individual animals. I mean, both of my lace monitors are tame and handleable. I can do whatever I want with them. Onyx is obviously a puppy dog. My female croc monitor, super handleable. Yoshi has been with me since she was little, you know. I've just invested so much in the animals and they've invested so much in me. And I've put myself in a position where nobody is ever going to keep them as well.
Yeah.
And nobody's going to have enclosures this big. Nobody does. So it's just one of those things where, you know, I screwed myself by setting a new standard.
Yeah,
but
pretty much.
You know, at the same time, the animals don't really need it. And I think that that a new keeper would probably mitigate a lot of those by interacting with the animals more. Because I don't really interact with them a lot. You know, I don't hang out with them and take them out, you know, whatever. So you have a catch-22 where you can keep them in a smaller enclosure. They'll be just as happy as long as you're interacting with them and giving them more psychological nourishment, which isn't hard to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll see. It's just one of those things. It's been kind of a long time coming, and I was waiting on a lot of our DNA test results from the hybrid project and our other DNA projects at UC Davis and Therion, and just like trying to figure out kind of, I really wanted to get some stuff published, which we did in the Reptiles magazine beginning of this year.
Okay.
There's a whole spread in there all about the Parthenogenic project.
Okay.
And the hybridization.
So I wanted to ask you about that too. How did the hybrid project turn out?
So the hybrid project turned out really good. We proved out that like you could still end up with genetic diversity even when you're producing animals parthenogenically.
Okay. You're turning into a robot.
That's another thing. Are you there?
Yeah.
Your side froze.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Your internet connection is unstable.
Yeah.
But we had it was the same issue we had before with the project. We had like a bunch of people branch out and try to, you know, just we're naysayers and whatever, like they always do anytime somebody's trying to do something new and innovative. And then none of them read the project. None of them went out and read the material. None of them read the proposal.
Yeah, I'm losing you here, buddy.
Plan, and then nobody read it. Oh.
Yeah, I'm losing you big time. So I'll have to look for the info, or if you have links to anything, if you want to send it to my email, and then I'll post it with the video. Oh, are you there?
Hear me now?
Yeah, I got you. You're frozen on the screen, but I heard you.
It should catch back up. Okay. You got it now?
Yeah,
All right,
I got you now.
I switched over to the internet in the building.
Oh, okay.
So it should be good.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had when we started that project, we just had a bunch of people reach out just naysayers and stuff, just anytime anybody's trying to do something new or innovative.
Yeah.
And then none of them read the project plan. None of them read the project after it got started. None of them read the project in its completion. We had it published in the largest reptile magazine there is. Nobody read it. And it's been posted on our website for 2 years. So in PDF form where you can download it. So, and it's a 12-page
I'm gonna go check that out tonight.
Yeah, so it's a 12-page old project and everything. It's got my cell phone number on it. I mean, you're welcome to call, send emails, whatever. With all the DNA test results of everything. And then it even talks about kind of the species where they're at geographically also.
Okay.
And how they share a lot of stuff. But ultimately, what I'd like to do is, like if we tried the hybridization project with a black dragon, you would know as soon as the animals hatched whether you had a parthenogenic animal, because parthenogenic black dragon is going to be all black.
Yep.
Because you're working with a trait where you have two of the genes present. So, same thing is if we had. So the next logical hybridization would have been with the croc monitor and the lace, which we tried also. We just never published anything about it, which I thought people would be more interested in that, and nobody really cared about it. So
that's odd.
We didn't get a whole lot of questions about it, and people acted like because I think a lot of this information is coming second and third hand, where somebody says something on a forum, and then that guy says something, and that guy says something, and then somebody asks me a question, and they never actually saw it firsthand. So it's just one of those weird things where I'm like, dude, I'm doing all this stuff for me. I don't care if you guys approve of it.
Yeah.
Of course you're going to be negative. You're negative about everything.
Yeah.
And you don't even have monitor lizards. Like they don't even have, most of them didn't even keep monitor lizards. And the animals that they did have were in like horrible conditions.
Yeah.
But these are the people that are going out trying to pretend like they know something. It's like, dude, what are you doing? What are you doing for the hobby? Nobody's going to remember the animals that I bred, right? They're going to remember the things that I brought back into monitor breeding, which is starting to come up a lot lately because people are starting to realize that there is a difference in quality between breeders now.
Yeah.
Because of all the work that I did with incubation temperatures over the last few years. Because I incubate my black dragons at 80 degrees and other people are getting tail deformities and animals that don't grow. And then they're trying to say, oh, it's a different locality of black dragon. No, it's not. It's a shitty locality that you're producing because you're incubating them at 86 degrees because you think they're going to hatch 2 months sooner.
Yep.
You're ruining them. They're literally developing screwed up.
Yep.
They're getting lungs underdeveloped. They have tail fusions. You can see it in the totes in the background of Kevin's videos where he has a bunch of black dragons with kinked tails and literally their tails are fused together on the end. That's all incubation temp. Nothing else.
100%. So we had crested geckos. We had a whole bunch of them. And we were putting them in an incubator and incubating them at a set temperature, like 81, 82 degrees. And we started to notice they were hatching 50 days, 55 days, 60 days, no problem. And it's like, but the babies are real small, real hard to get eating. Sometimes they wouldn't thrive and they would just die. So I stopped using the incubator and just put them up in my closet. And the house temperature is anywhere from 77 to 78 degrees and just left them. They were going 90 days, 100 days, 120 days, but the babies were larger. They were eating right out of the egg. They were super healthy. And I just said, you know what? We're trying to get babies to hatch 60 days earlier for what? So that they can not thrive? Like we had babies that would hatch. They were hatching out of an egg that a 60-day baby hatched out, and they were twice the size of that baby. And it was like, what's happening here?
It's like if you have a baby, like a human baby that hatches out in 8 months, like that's a premature baby.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So all you're doing is creating premature babies. Yep. I mean, our black dragons come out way darker, way bigger. They eat pinkies usually within a week. Mm-hmm. And we have 100% hatch rate, 100% yolk absorption rate. And they just do way better in captivity. They're more responsive to temperature changes and everything. I don't have to put them in the cage with a bunch of humidity in it, because usually if you hatch out an animal too fast, you generally want to put it into an enclosure that is similar to the incubator, you know, to where it's high humidity and the temperature is about the same, so that so they're not shocked, you know. But with the black dragons, they come out and they're just a lot calmer, they're chiller, they do better. We don't have issues with failure to thrive at all. I mean, and we're producing a ton more animals. So, I mean, you figure you got 20 black dragons, but also, so based on what biologists say a monitor should take to hatch, which is around 280, I think, to 320 days, somewhere around there.
So almost a year.
In the wild. Yeah. So you figure they're laying their eggs at 78 degrees, and that doesn't include a nighttime cool down. So you figure in the wild, they're probably averaging around 76, 75 degrees for incubation temps. If you have a water monitor that lays eggs in the dirt out there in Indonesia or whatever.
Yeah.
So you can also back figure that around every degree of temperature change accounts for about 15 to 20 days of incubation duration, right? So technically, if I'm incubating at 86 degrees and I knock 3 degrees off that, that should increase my incubation time by around 60 days, 40 to 60 days, right? Okay, well, if you take your incubation temps from 86 degrees and you drop them to 83, you know how much time it adds? 0. It is negligible if it adds any.
Okay.
We saw an average of 0 to 7 days when we knocked 3 degrees off, which means all you're doing at 86 degrees is fucking that lizard up for life.
Yeah.
That's the only thing you're doing. It's not benefiting you hatching the animals out any faster. It certainly can't be benefiting the animal. And all of those developmental issues are happening in the first couple weeks of incubation, just like the same thing with a human, where you have your heart and your organs and everything happening in like the first couple weeks.
Yeah.
So if you're throwing an animal into an incubator, there could be an argument for maybe using a lower incubation temp in the beginning and then gradually raising it back up. But I don't know why you would want to do that. You know, if you incubate at 80 degrees, we're only increasing incubation duration by about 2.5 to 3 months. So, I mean, they're taking basically a third longer to incubate, but the animals are coming out way nicer, way better. You're producing a better product for the customer.
Sure.
So it's just the same argument with the UV. You're literally just a financial thing, and you don't care about the end result, and you don't care about the animal. You don't care about the product that you're producing to the customer, because you can always fall back and make yourself feel better by saying, oh, well, you're taking care of it wrong, or, you know, it's probably something you did, which is what everybody does.
Yeah, 100%.
I've never subscribed to that. I always give people their money back or replace their animals if they have issues 90% of the time. Because I have care sheets. So I always have people verify their setups with me first, and I'll have them send me pictures. I've even done video phone calls. My cell phone number is listed. How many other breeders are answering their cell phone? Kevin doesn't. He doesn't, no fucking way. He wants to pretend like he's too busy, you know, making rock videos and being in the closet more than his lizards are. So he's
that's a good one.
So it's just one of those things where, you know, it's like if you really sat down and looked at what you're doing, you would change it. It just these are things that any breeder could try out for themselves. Knock 3 degrees off your incubation temp and then see what happens. What do you risk? There is 0 risk as far as animals' health. You're already risking the shit out of their health, incubating them at 86. You might as well knock the risk down a little and produce a better product with what is the risk that might hatch a couple weeks later? That's not a risk.
That 90 days of those retic eggs killed me. Like the stress.
Dude, I wish I liked snakes.
The stress level of looking at the incubator constantly and seeing the temperature fluctuate and being like, oh my God, it's 90 days. And to hear water monitors and Parsons chameleons and Panther chameleons and all these other things that are 9 months, 10 months, 12 months, 24 months. It's like, it's an insane amount of work that somebody like yourself puts in. And I would say that at the end of the day, caring about your animals and Kevin caring about his animals, I wish that everybody could be on the same page and be able to give that same strong enthusiasm to somebody new that's coming in, because they see the two sides of it and they're like, well, you got one guy at this end and one guy at this end, and who do I follow? You know, and it's like, we see this in so many different YouTubers and people that are putting content out there. It's tough. It's really, really hard to justify, you know, how do you take care of something when there's so many people out there that are trying to say, I have the best way. So
yeah, but the best way for them is always the way that they're doing it and have been doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're not going to go back and say like, oh man, yeah, I was doing it wrong for the first couple of years, but I got it figured out now.
Yeah.
They got too big of an ego. They're not going to do it. They're not going to admit that they ever did anything wrong. Just like Kevin doesn't ever send out videos saying like, oh, dude, we had this lizard die because we had a heat bulb go out and it went septic.
Yeah.
You know, he's not going to do it because it makes him look like makes mistakes.
Yeah.
Which we all know he does.
But
everybody that works for him talks shit behind his back. So we all know all this stuff happens.
We're all the same, and this is something that I feel that I thrive on is, first of all, I can take criticism. I'm married and have kids. I have zero problem with that. If somebody doesn't like, so I always say this in these videos, if you don't like it, you can either move on, talk shit, and if you want to do that, that's fine. I mean, I'm 45 years old. God, I'm old, and at the end of the day, if you want to talk shit and say whatever, whatever, have fun. But the ego thing is so bad. Like, it's so bad. I am 45 years old and constantly I feel like I'm learning something new, and I'm always learning from other people. Even my 21-year-old son and my 16-year-old son, I learn things from them. I learn things from my daughters. You know, I will never stop learning stuff. And I think in the reptile industry, the egos get so inflated by absolute bullshit that it's hard to get past that layer of crap.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, like, so
poor Kevin.
With Kevin, yeah, it's like, dude, he has spent so much time trying to shit on the successes that I've had, but in a way that unknowingly shot himself in the foot at the same time, because he just doesn't have the intellect. Like, he just doesn't have it. Yeah. So like, he even tried to say, they're like, oh, because you literally can't criticize what I'm doing from a point of view where what you're doing is better. You can't do it. No. Because I have giant enclosures, medical grade UV lighting, the animals are producing more, like, all of the things that I've done have all proven that whatever I'm doing is working. Yeah. Period. So you can't shit on that. So what does he do? He goes out of his way to tell everybody, oh, well, he hasn't been doing it as long as he says he is. There's no way he could have been breeding lizards for 15, 16 years, blah, blah, blah. Well, okay, so your argument is that I came in here and kicked everybody's ass in what, less time?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that makes you look like even more of a dumbass.
Yeah, that's bad.
So,
that's bad.
Like, what? I'm trying to help you out, buddy. Like, get out of your own way.
Yeah.
So, it's just one of those things where it's like, dude, eventually you just got to shut up and concede. You know, that you kind of...
Never going to happen. Never going to happen.
Doing too good.
Never going to happen.
Plus, it doesn't, like, even with me getting out of the hobby after this year, like, I'm not, like, I don't care about this stuff in the level that these other guys do.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't my only mojo, you know. Like I have a lot of other stuff I like to do, stuff that I'd like to do a lot more. I mean, it's cool and all, but I mean, if I started, you know, a YouTube page and a business around like my half-mile world record cars or whatever that I have where I beat half-mile speed records and shit. Like, yeah, I'd have a bunch of people asking me questions about that and the mechanics behind all the computer systems and stuff I build and this and that. But it's just another hobby. It's literally just another hobby. I'm just not that invested into it where this doesn't give me self-worth. I have self-worth, and this just reinforces it. You know, it just reinforces the fact that I have a very fine-tuned state of mind where I like to learn and research stuff, and it's really detail-oriented, and that's served me really well with keeping the monitors, specifically because they are a detail-oriented species. They're extremely advanced. All of these animals are the most advanced water monitors and monitor lizards to keep in captivity. And there's a reason why I've been successful with so few animals. So it kind of plays back to that expectation where everybody expects the same result from all these different animals, right? But in my case, if I'm able to get the same result with multiple animals and multiple species, then that means that what I'm doing on a biological level is universal. It doesn't matter if I bring in an animal from the wild or if I bring in an animal from somebody else's project that they haven't had successes with. Whatever they're doing is not working, and whatever I'm doing on a biological level is triggering things in these animals that get them to breed and lay eggs successfully in captivity. So all of this stuff that I've done, I've proven that they are universal techniques for a lot of animals. Do I try to change their personalities with this stuff? No, because that's a ridiculous thing to want to do. That is a whole different ballgame. Like, if you're an asshole, there's nothing that anybody can do to make you a nice person. Some people just aren't nice. You know, like mass murderers. That's why nobody understands a mass murderer, because they're not a mass murderer. You know, so it's like, if you're crazy, you don't think you're fucking crazy. You're crazy. You have no way of knowing whether you're crazy because you are you. It's subjective. So it's like, it's the same thing with the animals. You can't begin to assume anything about these animals. The only thing that I can assume is the science and biology of every one of these animals. Personality and temperament, I cannot ever assume any of that stuff, nor can I assume any level of interaction is gonna inspire sympathy in some lizard where it doesn't want to kill me. So if it's like the only way that you really can be successful with this many species in this environment is to do it scientifically. If you're not using science, at least diagnostic science, it's just not possible. Just like if you put, even with your snakes in the drawer, you don't know what your snakes are doing all day. They're in a drawer. Good point. If you have all your lizards in closets with no windows at Nerd, how could you possibly testify to their habits or possibly gain any visual data, any diagnostic data from that animal being at your facility? It's not possible. You can't see them. You have no line of sight. There are no optics. So when you have large enclosures with large areas and HD cameras, 4K cameras, there's 16 4K cameras in this building. Not to mention all of the fronts of all the enclosures are all Lexan. They're all 090 thick Lexan. So you can always see the animals, plus they have the room to be able to show you those things. If they're in a small area, I mean, what do you expect them to do? They can only move 6 feet over here or another foot this way. They're either going to bask or be in the water. That's their only choice. So, and then you're only using heat from a UV source that's on for 12 hours a day, 14 hours a day. Okay, well, you've just ruined your lizard's entire morning, because now it has to bask for at least the first 4 hours. Otherwise, it's going to get sick from the food that you left in its stomach from the day before, because you're taking its heat away at night. So it's like, you know, what are you doing? You're creating this system where the animals literally can't give you any information. And then on the back end, you're shitting on all the other people who actually receive it.
Yeah.
How does it
Pretty
make
much.
sense? It doesn't make sense. It
Yep.
just literally doesn't make sense. But what's cool is people, you know, like yourself and a lot of my other breeding friends and a lot of other big breeders are all starting to pick up on this stuff now. And, you know, people like Nerd and some other people are not looking too hot.
Yeah.
So,
That
you know,
sucks.
because you have people who want to, you know, $2,800 for a black dragon is a large investment for an animal. Well,
Yep.
if you're getting a black dragon from someone who you know incubates them at a crappy temp, who you know doesn't produce a whole lot of them, and who you know doesn't microchip the animals, and who you know for a fact will not back you in taking care of that animal, who are you going to go with?
Yeah.
Obviously, you're going to go to the other breeder who has a better product, better communication, a friggin' care sheet that he stands behind. You know,
Yeah,
and the
for
animals
sure.
are all microchipped. It's just a better investment. Like if you were an accountant, you would choose that investment over the counter investment.
Yeah.
Period. End of
Yeah.
story. Just from an investment point of view, you would always choose the better investment.
Yeah,
Without
absolutely.
the allure of what? Being able to say, oh, I got a nerd black dragon. You know how many times I've heard that in a negative connotation? Way more than I've ever heard it in a positive connotation. Like, fuck,
Yeah.
man. Yeah, it's just one of those things.
For sure. And, you know, like I said, it's such a positive to hear somebody willing to come out and just say, this is what I do. This is how I do it. It's all right here. Take it or leave it. But proof is in the pudding.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure something out to compare it to, and it's hard to compare it to anything. You know,
well, how much leverage would I have in what I was saying if I never did shit with the lizards?
Exactly.
You know, it just wouldn't make sense. It's like me saying I have a cure for cancer, but I'm literally dying of cancer.
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
well, if you have a cure for cancer, what the fuck? Why didn't you take it?
Yeah.
Like, we need you to stay around. We need you to make more cures. Well, I don't want to take it. I'm just gonna hold on to it and die.
Yeah.
Because I have an ego and I'm not gonna, you know, help myself or anybody else. Like, no, you're full of shit, is what you are.
Yeah. Exactly.
So it's just one of those things where it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and it's just, you know, like your successes also, you know, justify the means.
So, well, all right, we're gonna wrap this up, everybody. It's been great, Cory, having you on. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
When the video is going to drop, I'll let you know. We'll put all your information in the description. We're also going to link the articles and everything. Take some time, people. Go on and look at this stuff. A lot of work has been put into it. If you're ever thinking about keeping a monitor, this is obviously the guy that is giving the information that's positive, and not hiding behind anything. So again, Cory, thanks for coming on. And I know you got some other stuff going on. So we'll definitely have to keep in touch. I want to get some information from you on these lights too. So I'll shoot you a message.
Sure. Sounds
right.
good.
Have a great day, man. And again, thank you so much.
You too. Thank you.
Yep. Bye.